Ralph, you tweeted that you were shocked by this. Can you explain really what's happened in the course of the last couple hours?
Yeah, I am absolutely stunned by this news. Everyone that I spoke to throughout this process, and I'm certainly not the only one that reported this, told me that Matt Rule was their number one choice far and away, and that Mike McCarthy, who's now the Dallas Cowboys coach, was probably number two. They thought Rule wanted to coach with them, and I think my understanding is that they were shocked when they found out that Rule was going to go to Carolina. We now know that Matt Rule, ESPN reported that Matt Rule's been offered a 7-year, $60 million deal from the Carolina Panthers. He reportedly called the Giants, told them, said, you want to match? And that's just way too steep a price for them to pay, way too many years for them for a head coach. Plus, they'd have to pay a buyout to Baylor that a lot of people think might have been worth about $15 million. So they chose to go in another direction. And honestly, Justine, if you looked at the 7 candidates when this started, we were all shocked that the Giants even interviewed Joe Judge. He came out of nowhere. I would have ranked him near the bottom as not as a coach, but as a likely guy to become their next head coach. I don't think anybody saw this coming.
Yeah, I guess money talks when it comes to Matt Rule. How did they make this change so quickly here, Ralph?
Well, apparently they knew as of last night, or at least some of them knew as of last night, that Matt Rule was either leaning towards Carolina or was going to end up as their head coach. So they weren't, the rest of us were shocked when we woke up this morning. I don't get the impression that the Giants were. And they pivoted quickly because they, unbeknownst to all of us, they had identified Joe Judge as a guy they really liked. We viewed him in the second tier of candidates, but they were apparently blown away by him in the interview process. And they were ready to move. I think also, and we'll have to hear from the owners at some point on this, I don't think they wanted to have the appearance of scrambling, which is what we all thought was going to happen. They lose Matt Rule. Mike McCarthy's gone. They have an interview coming up with Josh McDaniels, but as I had reported, he didn't really want the Giants as much as they were interested in him. They could have looked like they were just searching far and wide. What do we do now? They didn't want that impression. They wanted to be decisive, and obviously they were.
Judge obviously comes from a championship pedigree under the Belichick coaching tree. What do you think he brings to this Giants franchise that they were so attracted to him?
Well, I have to go by what they said they wanted in a new head coach. They were looking for leadership. They were looking for someone to be a take charge CEO type of guy who didn't necessarily want full power, full autonomy over the organization, but could work well in the structure they had in place. Was willing to have a sort of culture change in the organization, not necessarily the locker room culture, but fix things throughout the organization that he felt was wrong. Joe Judge is 38 years old. He's never been a head coach, but obviously he must have sold them on that ability. He did learn from Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, two of the best program builders in the business, and I'm sure that was a big factor as well. And also, there are a lot of people around the league who believe that special teams coaches are just as good at managing everything as offensive and defensive coordinators, and maybe even better because they have a lot of the game to focus on. They're not just focused on, the defensive coaches calls the plays, then gets ready for the next set. They have more of an overall vision of things, and that more teams could tap into that, group of coaches, as the Baltimore Ravens did with John Harbaugh. It's unusual for the Giants, but obviously they were thinking outside the box.
Well, there's somebody else on the market right now with head coaching experience, and that's Jason Garrett. And there's a report out there that the Giants have requested to interview him for their offensive coordinator position. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, I heard this morning that they had requested permission to interview him. I'll be honest, I thought at the time that was for the head coaching job, but we now know that it's for an offensive coordinator position. What I can tell you about Jason Garrett is there are people in the Giants organization who absolutely love him, and their love affair with him goes back to, I think it was 2003 when he was a backup quarterback with the Giants. I was covering the team then, and people told me all the time he is like a coach on the sidelines. He's going to make a great head coach someday. When he was seemingly about to be fired by the Dallas Cowboys, I had been told that the Giants were considering interviewing him, that they weren't sure they were going to, so they didn't think they could sell him to the fan base. He's sort of looked at as a failed Cowboys coach now. Hiring him as the head coach probably wouldn't have energized a lot of people, but they like him as a coach, and they thought he would work well with Daniel Jones, be a good influence on the offense. So this might turn out to be the best possible fit. They get a head coach that they can probably sell. It's going to take some doing since he's a bit of an unknown, and a guy who I think will be a great offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach if he decides to take the job. Sometimes head coaches like to take a year off before they get back in. So it remains to be seen if Jason Garrett will end up with the Giants or not.